Going to pot. Soon, CVS, the drugstore, won't sell cigarettes, and the FDA is launching a brand new anti-tobacco campaign. But pot, now legal in a couple of states, as the president has been downplaying the effects of marijuana. Makes you wonder, whatever happened to the war on drugs? John Walters is the former director of National Drug Control and Policy under George W. Bush, the so-called drug czar. He joins us live this morning from D.C. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Steve.
Yeah, whatever did happen to the war on drugs? Once upon a time, it was big, and now, not so bad.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of people trying to keep kids safe. There are a lot of people getting treated. Unfortunately, some of them die, as we've seen with Mr. Hoffman recently. And there's still a lot of, police and DEA agents and others out there risking their lives. A person that's taken a hike is President Obama. I mean, he and the Attorney General have stopped enforcing the law, not changed the law, not had a discussion about this, just willfully said, well, we don't think this should happen. And unfortunately, we've seen this in our own culture. This is going to cause more people to get sick. And not only with marijuana, but as Mr. Hoffman and President Obama's own discussion of his own use, it doesn't just end with marijuana. When you start with marijuana, you go on to cocaine or heroin and other things. So the drugs are as bad, if not worse than ever, in their potency and the danger. But leadership is not there.
Yeah, you were referring to the president's own comments about marijuana. He said recently, quote, "I view it, marijuana, as a bad habit and a vice, not very different from the cigarettes that I smoked as a young person. I don't think it is more dangerous than alcohol." Famously, you read one of those books by the New Yorker guy. He smoked a lot of pot. He did cocaine, our president did, when he was a young person. Now it sounds like, he's supporting CVS for stopping selling tobacco, and yet smoking pot.
Yeah, I think there's an important issue there you touch on, and it should be emphasized. Supply and demand have to be attacked both, and we've done a lot to try to encourage people. We've all had relatives die painfully from cigarette smoking effects and consequences and cancer, but we need to also control the supply. If kids and people have it available cheap, it's more of a danger. What he's done with marijuana is he's allowed it to become a corner store in Colorado, and the federal law has not changed. And you can see this talk about how many $1 billion this business is going to grow if has been projected even in the Wall Street Journal. So why do we need more of this? I mean, why is it that we can't be consistent about talking about threats? And he doesn't have to arrest a single person. He could have used his connection with young people to explain what's wrong. Instead, he kind of willfully decided that he was going to be cool at the cost of a lot of young lives.
Yeah, and John, as we go, every time we do a story on pot, we get email from people, pot is no worse than alcohol, and you're always talking about alcohol. But when you were on last time, the scientific evidence is that pot impacts a young person's IQ. It makes you dumber in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of chemical brain damage that we hadn't known about 15, 20 years ago, and we now have growing research about that, about the connection to both triggering and worsening depression, serious mental illness, thoughts of suicide in young people. We know the teenage brain is more malleable because it's maturing. We didn't know this before, but now we do. This is like asking for an epidemic of brain damage in our kids, and it's just so irresponsible, and to know better and to say this is, I think, inexcusable.
All right, John Walters, once upon a time the drug czar for the United States of America. John, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you, Steve.